sort of fully responsible for that income side of the budget, and I feel that pressure. Some of you feel that pressure. Some of your husbands feel that pressure. That is a critical part of the budget, is the income side of the budget. And then there, on the expense side of the budget, in my mind, we sort of have two broad categories of things. One of those things is the big fixed kind of expenses. We have tithing, we have taxes, we have mortgage, we have insurance. Those things that are sort of at the top of the lines on the expenses, and then you know what the numbers are, and you plug them in every month, and they're just kind of there. And then you have beneath that, if you're like us, you have the other stuff. The stuff that you don't know what it's going to be from month to month, and you try to keep it within the parameters that it's supposed to be within, and that's stuff like groceries and clothes and dance lessons and school lessons and the other kind of discretionary things that are down at the bottom of the budget. And when Diane and I have our budget discussions, we usually talk about the discretionary part of the budget, right? The groceries, how much are we spending on groceries and gas and lessons and sports camps and things like that, and how can we control that? We usually start talking about that, and we usually end up crying, one or both of us. That's usually where we focus our discussions on the budget. Why is that? I think, it may be the easiest place to look at the budget. You can control how much you spend eating out, much easier than some of the other items on the budget list. And so that's where we tend to focus our energy. Today, really, this is Diane's show, and I'm just kind of thinking about one or two things. But I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that we normally don't think that much about, which is higher up on the budget list. Some of those fixed expenses. And for most of us in this room, if we own a home, if we're not renting, a mortgage expense is our biggest expense. Some of you own homes and have mortgages. Some of you may have paid off your mortgages and own your home free and clear. Some of you may be renting. But you either have a mortgage, you had a mortgage, or maybe in the future you will have a mortgage. Usually it's the biggest single expense on the budget is the mortgage payment. And it's a very tough question to ask whether our mortgage is eating up too much of our budget. It's a very hard question to ask and think about. There are a lot of different ideas if you look on the internet or talk to people, and I know there are some folks here who have been in or have had spouses in the mortgage industry. You can hear a lot of different things about how much of my monthly income should I spend on my mortgage. And I've done some looking, and you see numbers like 30%, or no more than 1/3 of your monthly income should be spent on your mortgage payment. And so if you think about a family, I'll do some math. I'm sorry, you should have been warned that there would be math, but it will not be much. I don't want to erase Diane's stuff. So I'm going to say if a family has an annual income of $50,000, this is going to be our hypothetical family. If you just were to look on the internet and say, okay, well, my mortgage payment shouldn't exceed 1/3 of that, you would do the math. You would divide that by 12, and you would see that your monthly income would be $401.66 per month. You would multiply that by 0.3 to get 30%, and you come out times 0.3 would give you $1,250. $1,250. So you could say, well, that should be your monthly mortgage payment, and for most people, that mortgage payment includes not only the debt amount, but also money for insurance, homeowners insurance, and taxes. your debt plus insurance and taxes is beneath $1,250, then you're okay. As I've looked into this and given it some thought, I really think that number, that 30% number, is in most cases too high for the average LDS family. For the average LDS family.
Not to be able to be generous and pay your tithing.
Say that louder, please.
In order to be generous and pay your tithing.
I think that's the key. You know, we are in many ways a peculiar people. And so some of the traditional rules about finance and some of the things that your next door neighbor may do may not apply so well to us. We have, and so as I thought about this, and this is Ben Brooks's thought, and so take it for what it's worth. But, you know, as I thought about the Mormon mortgage, you know, what I come up with in my mind as being maybe a better benchmark to manage our mortgages would be that our mortgage shouldn't exceed 25% of our net monthly income. What do I mean by our net monthly income? I mean, let's take into consideration that we pay tithes. Let's take into consideration that we pay taxes at a minimum. And then calculate what's left, and our mortgage payment shouldn't exceed 25% of that. That's a much more conservative approach to getting a mortgage. What you would find if you did that on this hypothetical family is if you took our 50,000 and then we subtracted off the top of that. So we start with 50,000. We subtract off for tithing $5,000. We subtract off, let's just say, and this is probably a low number, 5,000 for taxes. Probably a low number for someone who makes $50,000. Although, if you have 10 children like some of us do, the child credit will help there. This is a comma, by the way, as you couldn't tell. So you'd be left, as your starting point, you'd be left with $40,000 of annual net income. So then if you multiply that by, or if you divide by 12 to get your monthly income, you'd be left with 33 per month. Take 25% of that, and you would get a total monthly mortgage payment more in the $833 range. I don't know if you can see that. So you see the difference between $1,250 a month mortgage and an $833 a month mortgage, which is a difference of what, just over $400 a month. So this is what I think the sister here is talking about, is that's $400 more that you have a month to deal with as you work on your budget. You have that money to pay tithing. You have that money to establish reserve funds. You have that money to help those in need. You have that money to save for a mission. You have that money to feed your children. And so I think as we look at our budgets, these are the tough questions to ask. These are the tough questions to ask. And I don't want to say I know the answer for every family and how your mortgage should be sized. But this is something that should be reviewed and talked about, I think, in every family. We gave a little talk a while ago about finances, and I had a list of what I called the spouse's Bill of Rights. And one of the rights that I think each of you have, those of you who are married, is you have the right to sit down with your husband and have him participate actively in discussions about the budget. Reasonable discussions that don't end in crying. So what do you do? That's a hard question to ask. Maybe the hard question is, what do you do if you really sit down, think about it, and determine how much I mean, might you be able to, would the bank give you this mortgage? Absolutely, sure they would. Might you be able to live on this, you know, pay your other expenses and go along with this size of mortgage? Absolutely. But there's a trade-off and a cost to that the water may not get as far down the road to the other things, to your savings, to those things that actually make us stronger financially. You might be getting by, but you're gonna look a little bit more like me wearing the jacket. And so the idea is we want to have the right size jacket. So if you find that you want to do something about that, what are the options at that point? Ideas? What are the options if you look and you decide, I mean, this is our house we're talking about here. What do we do? What can we do? Ideas?
Pack our tents and go to the wilderness.
Alan's backyard. Ideas?
The thing I've been noticing, at least from what I've been seeing, for those who are just starting out, it's easier to get a home that's, you need to make repairs on and whatnot. Mostly for financial reasons, and yeah, it'd be nice if you had it all done and whatnot, but when you're just starting out or your family, you're wanting to put your own personal touches to it anyways. So why not get something that you're gonna have to fix up and tweak a bit, that, you know, is to your acceptable being able to deal with.
That's a good point, because obviously with this lower payment, if you're getting a new mortgage, that means the cost of your house is gonna be less. It's gonna be more of a starter home. It's gonna be more of the kind that you start, fix up, improve it, you beautify it. Go ahead, sister.
If you already have an existing mortgage and you're paying X amount of interest on it, you can always, if you have good credit, go and see if you can refinance it down.
That's one of the options you have, is refinance. It's possible that if you have good credit, depending on how much you owe, what the interest rates are like, you may be able to reduce the amount you pay on your current mortgage. That's right. Someone said.
Oh, I was just saying real quick, and when refinancing, don't fall for those, like, cash out and to get extra onto it, even though the payment may go down, it's just not necessary.
That's right. There are a lot of tricks. If you're getting cash out, it just means you're getting a loan. That's your mortgage rate, and you know, I think that I hope that the era of using our houses as piggy banks and whatnot, and taking money out, I hope that's over. What's the other option?
I know that if you pay off, if you have a 30-year mortgage, you pay off one extra payment every year, it drops it to a 22-year mortgage.
Well,
So making extra payments, not just, here's another payment, because they'll take the interest and over the payment, but making it a principal payment.
Yeah. Well, that's a great thing to do. Again, if your budget allows for that, that's a super thing to do. You pay off your debt and eliminate it faster. You know, probably the harder thing to even think about with a mortgage is if you've gotten into a home, you know, maybe you've gotten into a home when house prices were at their very highest and the loans were the easiest to come by. Right now, you might find yourself with a mortgage that's not affordable. And, you know, the hard thing to do there is to think about, do I sell my house? Do we downsize? You know, it's not a bad word. It's not a bad word. It takes a lot of courage if we find ourselves in that situation, but it's not a bad word. I would lots rather be in a modest home, being able to save, being able to pay my tithing, than just scraping by from month to month with a mortgage that's not affordable. The stress goes down, the peace in our homes will go up. That's a discussion and that each family has to have, but that's the other option if you find yourself with a mortgage that is not realistic for your income. I'm taking way too much time, so I need to give it back over to Diane. But it takes some of those choices as we look at the big things on our budget. My point is, look at the big things on your budget as well as the little things. Some of you may be